Alright. 19 minutes left of this shit.
And even more unlikely that if a universe existed, that it would be life permitting. So I've heard also some arguments made about, that atheists would make, that we're just like really lucky, and they'll use something like the lottery argument, right? Well, it's very improbable for someone to win the lottery, yet we see people winning the lottery all.
Yes. Now let me just readjust my computer here. Not too bad. Back. So lottery argument is just basically the idea that, roll a dice enough times, you're gonna get a certain, or when you roll a dice a certain number of times, you're gonna get, whatever result you want.
All the time, right? It's just improbable that it can be overcome. And so the problem is that this is a bit of a false argument.
What is a false argument?
Because in a lottery, think about you're churning a bunch of balls inside.
It depends on what kind of lottery it is, but we'll go with it.
This like churning machine, and you spit one out and you get a number, right? But a more accurate, so it's like, what's the likelihood that my number comes out of the machine that's spitting the balls out, right? Some of the balls, imagine these are chances that a life-permitting universe would exist, right? So some.
Remember, we still don't know what the actual odds of a life-sustaining universe coming into existence are. You're assuming that, the odds of a life-sustaining universe arising are astronomically low. Now, I don't know how you came to this. I'd like to see how you came to this, but whether or not, whatever the odds are, it still happened.
There's a black ball in there. And that black ball, there's a bunch of white balls and there's a black ball, and that black ball is the life-permitting universe. We just got really lucky, and that's the one that got spit out, right? But I think this is actually a bad analogy. A more correct analogy.
It's an analogy. It's not going to be perfect.
Is, why would any ball be spit out? Why would any ball be spit out and chosen at all? And if a ball were to be spit out, then why would it be the black ball that is the life-permitting universe?
Why would there be balls?
Why would there be balls at all? Exactly. So why does any universe, and you'll hear some of these arguments and debates, why does any universe exist? And if a universe were to exist, it's far more likely that a universe that didn't permit life would exist than it is that a universe that would permit life would exist. So it again goes back to fine-tuning it. It again goes back to design. It again goes back to a mind that intentionally created this. And
the problem with a mind intentionally creating this is you have to show evidence of this mind being existent, and you still have the problem of, well, where did this initial mind come from?
Tuned it just right for for it to be a life permitting universe. And then when you talk about a multiverse, you only compound the error, right? You essentially now, instead of a single universe, a universe, right? You go to a multiverse, but that multiverse also would have to has to overcome the why does a universe exist at all? How did something spring from nothing?
And I could ask, why does a creator exist at all? How did the creator come from, whatever was before or without the creator's presence? I mean, do these people think? Do these people have, like, an answer for that? It's, a little sad, actually.
And I thought it was neat that the last video there referenced Psalm 19:1. The heavens declare the glory.
I don't know.
Of God, the sky above proclaims His handiwork. Day to day pours out speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. That was a good one. And I think the Psalms clearly point out the obvious, which is that God has put all of this in place as evidence of His existence.
So the problem there is in order for the Earth to be evidence of a creator's existence, or in order for the universe to be evidence of a creator's existence, you have to demonstrate that the universe itself was the product of a creator in the first place. You have yet to do that. And until you do that, you don't really have a case. Color coding my culture jars because the media doesn't look all that different, although my Junkus media will look different. But like I've got my general half-strength Marashik and Skoog that's not color coded. And then I've got some different plant growth regulators, which I'm color coding with different color tape.
Right? He's essentially screaming his existence to all who are open to hear it. The problem is that fallen man is unwilling to listen.
Wait, what? Fallen man is what?
Right? He's essentially screaming his existence to all who are open to hear it. The problem is that fallen man is unwilling to listen.
It's not that we're not willing to listen. I mean, religion is very popular, and there are a lot of people that believe in some sort of creator. I don't think there's anything bad about asking critical questions of these assertions. I think it's important to check yourself before you wreck yourself, if you know what I mean. If you're going to make an assertion, you should be able to back it up with evidence. I'm making tissue culture medium for plant growth, and I am making this medium based on some papers that people have written about the particular species I'm culturing and what worked best for them. And I'll see for myself how well it works, but it's always good to check the veracity of claims.
Right? And so, man wanting to elevate himself above God or to godhood is unwilling to even listen. Stephen Meyer, we'll talk more about some of his stuff when we get into evolution.
I am so looking forward to that.
But he talks about how all of this physical evidence is essentially goes back to a conclusion. What do we see? What can we observe today that results in order, in something that looks to be designed, that looks to be engineered? Well, we know what creates that. A mind creates that, right? When you look at a watch, not an Apple Watch necessarily. When you look at the old style watches that had gears, right? That some people wear. You look at that and you say, the story of the watch. Oh, that's because a bunch of rocks and pieces of tin were on the road, and over millions of years, people would walk by and kick those things together, and eventually it formed some gears, and then those gears came together and formed a face, and the salt and sand kind of came together, and the sun baked it, and it turned into a face. And then one day I was walking down the street, and I saw the watch, and I picked it up and put it on my wrist.
So there are a couple of issues with the analogy there. The first is that he's assuming the processes that brought the watch and the components of the watch together were random. And when we see organic molecules and systems of living things, a lot of times it's more than just random stuff happening. It's certain molecules are more attracted to each other than they are to their surrounding molecules, and several hundred other things that are at play. Just a sec. Give me like the 30 seconds. This is the cocoon of a moth called Eupicardia coletta. And it is one of the several Saturniid moths that I rear. And I've been keeping these guys going for several years now. This is like, I don't know, the fifth generation out from a small group of caterpillars that David Wagner at UConn gave me when I was still in Connecticut. So it's been a while. And let's just look at this cocoon for a moment. Okay? Now, when the caterpillar was finished feeding on ash, this is an ash stem. They were eating ash. I used to rear them on privet, but there's not really privet out here in Colorado. There's a lot of ash. This is probably a female cocoon, just judging by its size, but I won't really know until, like June when it emerges. My question is, well, let me just, this is a pretty intricate cocoon. It's got this very thick silk, and you can see, like, little black traces of, like, initial silk the caterpillar laid down as the foundation so it could spin the cocoon within a certain bound into a shape. And it has a very unique shape. It's hanging by a peduncle. It's, just a fucking patch of silk that's holding it, adhering it to its branch. And there's a hole at the tip that, like the caterpillar intricately made, like, a parallel closing so that when the moth emerges, it just has to kind of push away that silk so it can climb out. A caterpillar built this. Now, you could say the caterpillar designed it, but my question is, this is clearly the product of a living organism, and did the caterpillar have pre-programmed into itself as like just a series of reflexes and signaling to the brain and other parts of the body the blueprints for this, or is the caterpillar just a thinking agent with a powerful mind that designed this cocoon? And I ask this question for a few reasons. First of all, if a caterpillar indeed has such a powerful mind to be able to do this, what does it say about the way the majority of us treat caterpillars? And what does it say about our attitude towards insects in general? But, more likely, this was just all instinctual, reflexive type stuff. Which means that intricacy can come about from something that's not particularly intelligent. So why is any other natural thing in our universe any different?
Right? Obviously, that makes no sense, right?
There'd be no band.
Yeah, there'd be no band, exactly.
Pocket blank.
And so, you look at things that are designed, and you infer to the best explanation. And your inference to the best explanation is that this was designed by a mind. And so, when you think about a universe and a world, and eventually we'll get into human beings and life, you look at what was there. And you say your inference to the best explanation is that this was created, this was designed by a mind. And what mind, and the reason we start with the origin of the universe over the origin of man, what mind could create a universe? It has to be a mind that's outside of this universe, that is, unimaginably powerful and lives outside of time and outside of the universe that we live in. So
that argument's like Occam's razor, right?
Yes.
Like
Yes.
anything that's unreasonable, we chop off and say,
Absolutely.
we're not going there.
Absolutely. But the problem is that over time, it wasn't always the case that religion and science were separate.
So I would argue that religion and science as processes are not particularly linked. Religious people and scientific people can overlap. I know a lot, I've spoken at length about some of this. I know plenty of religious scientists who I get along with just fine, and who do just fine science. Now, whether or not, a scientific worldview and a religious worldview in and of themselves are compatible, that's another matter.
It wasn't always that they were in conflict, but it seems in America and in the modern world today, there is this conflict between science and religion, right? Science and theism, and so what happens is a lot of atheist scientists will only allow for naturalistic explanation.
Science, by its very nature, doesn't concern itself with the supernatural in the first place. You know, it's like asking your plumber to fix your car.
For what they see, and because they're excluding even the possibility of design,
The scientists themselves are more than likely not excluding the possibility of design. They're just not considering it in their work. And the thing is, when it comes to biology, specifically biology, although these guys do get into some physics, so props to them for that. Because, you know, the issue is that a lot of these people like to object to biology and the concepts within biology, you know, and say like, oh well, you know, a lot of biological science does its thing without invoking the supernatural, and that's a problem. But when it comes to basic mathematical laws, physics, and chemistry, these people generally don't have an issue with, you know, the science not invoking the supernatural. And, you know, these guys are kind of the exception where they are talking about how, like, some physical properties of the universe seem to be caused by a designer. But by and large, a lot of these people who push for the idea of a designer do it just on the basis of biology without having any issue with perfectly natural explanations for physics, chemistry, mathematics. And, you know, there's quite a bit of validity to the idea that, you know, physics is applied math, chemistry is applied physics, biology is applied chemistry. And, you know, the parts are not the sum of the whole in it by any means, but, you know, why is it that once we get to the biological realm, things have to be supernatural, but things don't have to be supernatural at the lower realms of science?
from their thinking, they just say we'll figure it out later. Eventually, we'll figure it out.
That is the honest answer. That is the, I don't want to say the most comforting answer, but in a way it is, because at least we know we're not just settling for an explanation that seems, on the surface level, good and okay and sound, when in all reality it's, you know, got some problems with it.
The problem is the more evidence that we find. For example, when Darwin, and I'm sneaking in a little bit of evolution, when Darwin first postulated natural selection,
Yeah,
he didn't know about the inner workings of cells.
this is true. And I'm glad you brought that up, because this kind of alludes to my point where, you know, you don't have to see all of the trees to recognize the forest.
He only understood that the cell was the basic building block of life, but a cell was sort of a gelatinous blob. When you actually dig into the structure of a cell, you have many machines, you have code, you have replicators, you have all of these different you have readers and correctors. There's all these different things that are working inside the cell that Darwin had no idea about, right? And so when you look at things like that, and we'll get more into that with evolution.
And does that somehow make the theory of natural selection invalid?
All of this stuff, the universe.
Now, I just wanted to say why this is a dangerous thing. right now we have a good grasp of how the inside of a cell works. I'm not convinced, however, that we have the exact mechanisms of every inner working of a cell down pat. As we go along in science, we're going to discover new things about how and why certain things within a biological system function the way they do. If anything we know about biology hinges on us knowing down to the subatomic particle how and why, then we can't say we really know anything. And if that's the case, just a second. Close enough. So if that's the case, give me a minute. Let me just see, Cornerstone Church. Oh, SJ. Is it St. John, maybe? St. John, Nebraska. No, New Brunswick, sorry. I believe that's the same group. About Us. I want to know. Protestant Reformed Church. No, they're a, I don't want to straw man them, but, I don't know, what their, views on, like, modern medicine are, but there is a lot in modern medicine, a shocking amount, actually, where, different treatments for things, such as, like, SSRIs, and I don't know what their views on SSRIs are, and, I, personally, I think that any medication should be, not really taken unless it's absolutely necessary. So what I mean by that is, if you're having a hard time sleeping, before you get prescribed and start taking sleeping pills, improve your sleep hygiene and things like that first. And if after that you're still having a hard time sleeping, then you go on the sleeping pills. I'm kind of a middle of the road type of person where, like, medicines can be helpful, but I don't think they should be the first line of, defense, if you will, or the first thing you go to, unless it's, like a life-threatening emergency where, somebody's having an anaphylactic shock and you need to inject them with epinephrine. But other than, like, in most cases, I think that, we tend to overuse pharmaceuticals when there are like obesity related diseases that we take medications for. It's a lot easier just to not be fucking obese, and you won't have to be on 6 different medications because you have like diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and you're like blood pressure's through the roof, and so you need to take a blood pressure medication, but that blood pressure medication has its own side effects that you need another pill to stave off, and blah blah blah. But I think that when it comes to actually like needing medication, there's no shame in it, and we need to have a better way of assessing when somebody may or may not need medication. I didn't start any kind of psychiatric medications for many, many years, because I was trying, just traditional therapy and other things first, because I didn't want to necessarily be on a medication unless I absolutely had to. Even things like fucking aspirin, well, I take acetaminophen if I have a really bad headache or whatever. I don't go right to taking a, medication. I try just, going ahead and calming down, drinking some water, things like that first. And if after that the headache hasn't subsided, then I'll take a couple of acetaminophen and I'll be fine. Hang on, I hear a Matilda. Matilda! Matilda! There she is. There's my friend. Hi. 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 I know. I know I've missed you too, Matilda. Hi. 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 I know, I haven't seen you in like a day. Hi. Hi, Matilda. Hi, Matilda. Matilda. Okay. I'll be back up in a little while, okay? I'll miss you. You're so cute. Matilda, my roommate's dog. Um, she is just a sweetheart. We all love her. But anyway, um, a lot of medications that treat various conditions, we don't know all of the mechanisms for why they work. But we know that they do work. And that's a little more important right now when it comes to improving the quality of life for people and taking care of, various things that might go wrong. And I don't know if this is one of those churches that rejects all modern pharmaceuticals or what. And I don't want to make assumptions because, there are churches that are like that and there are churches that are not like that. I don't know. Um, but in any case, the fact that we have certain medical innovations that make, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because I am sort of assuming that at least some of these people benefit at least from some of these newer medical discoveries that have really improved the way that we live our lives. And if they want to reject things that we don't have the full understanding of the underpinnings of, I would challenge them to live only on, scientific and medical interventions that the exact underlying mechanism for which we fully understand, if we can actually quantify a full understanding of something. And so it gets a little murky there. Continue.
First, the fine tuning, how our bodies work, how cells themselves work. All of that starts leading you down the path of an engineer built this.
So just a moment, guys.
And being an engineer, I kind of like that. But this engineer is a little more.
Yeah. So one of the issues, and I'm not going to delve too much into design flaws. I think the whole design flaws issue is a little bit of a moot point, just because what we define as perfection may not be the same as what a designer defines as perfection, if there is a designer, creator, whatever you want to call it. Although the caveat there, I guess, would be, if God supposedly made us in his own image, then, we can use our standards to compare them to his work, because our standards would probably be about the same. But in any case, at any rate, I don't necessarily like the counter arguments from design flaws and things like that, because they get away from the point. And that point is, in order to assert a designer, you need evidence that the designer exists. And design itself is not inherently evidence of a designer, because we only know design, really, in the context of what we're capable of doing.
Powerful than I was. I am. But I thought it would be fitting to end with a scripture. Psalm 14, 1 through 3. The fool says in his heart, there is no God. They are
Yeah, so if even the fool is able to grasp that, what's your excuse?
corrupt. They do abominable deeds. There is none who does good. The Lord looks down from heaven on the children of man to see if there are any who understand, who seek after God. They have all turned aside, together they have become corrupt, and there is none who does good, not even one. So this is a fallen world, and it's only by God's grace that any of us are illuminated to the point where we can even think in this way. So go ahead, Rod.
Can I just quote, it just came to my mind as I'm watching this, and that is this. For the invisible things of him are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and deity. So they are without excuse, okay? For although they knew God, they didn't honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools, and exchanged the glory of God for immortal God, for images resembling mortal man, birds, animals, and creeping things. Therefore God gave them over to their own lust. And it's so important for us to watch every existence, no matter what it was, Media Persia, Greece, Rome, and now we're in today's, and we're seeing everything collapsing in the United States, not just here, around the world.
Yeah, I don't think that godlessness is the reason why we're having so many problems, especially in the United States. Majority of Americans still are Christian, and majority secular countries have much better qualities of life for everyone involved.
God gave us over to their own lust, and he backed off. There's no conviction. And look where we're going. And so the invisible things of God are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and deity. So we're all without excuse.
Yes.
They see him, they don't want him, and the battle is the scientist. Satan. That's the bottom line. Theologically.
Yeah, they try to elevate themselves. Go ahead.
To piggyback on that point, when we think of creation, we think of also. Not everybody thinks of it, but things of common grace and the restraint of common grace, which was brought up there. If he lifts his hand just a little bit and changes the calculations of anything, it's no more. You know, right now everything's being held together by this common grace, by his restraint on this.
And I think that God's general revelation, right? Again, I use the term, he's screaming.
Yeah, absolutely.
Through the evidence, he's screaming, I'm here, I'm behind it all. And we're just, some of us, not all of us, are too stubborn to see it, right? We're just too stubborn. We want to make ourselves, we want to elevate ourselves above God. And as a result, they exclude the idea of anything supernatural, from the argument. Did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, first of all,
So are they basically saying that the process is supposed to be you include the supernatural until proven otherwise, instead of you don't include the supernatural unless proven so? I mean, what the fuck kind of way of going about ascertaining the truth of our universe is that?
thanks for all your research, really interesting stuff.
Sure.
I like the videos a lot. The last video, at the end of it, it seemed like the guys, the experts were kind of like saying like they really didn't know what happened, and then they had the Bible verse after that. I've been half the experts don't even believe like they what they even say, that they just don't want to admit it.
Yeah, so a lot of and I've seen a lot of stuff where a lot of experts are coming around because again, the more we discover, the more obvious it becomes, right? The less you can argue against design. Now, you may not call it God, for evolution, it can be space aliens, right? They came and seeded the planet or something, right? But some intelligence created it. But when you get to the creation of the universe, which is why I started here, is because space aliens can't create the universe because they're inside the universe, right? So you have to imagine, for a designer for something like that, you have to imagine an all-powerful or an unimaginably powerful mind that exists outside of the universe to create the universe, right? And if that unimaginably powerful mind created the universe, then it's also the best explanation for what created life. Go ahead.
And this anti-God position of modern science is relative.
I wouldn't say modern science is anti-God. I don't think modern science is really concerned one way or another about God.
Recent.
It is.
Henry Morris told us, maybe those are the founders of modern science. Johannes Kepler, Isaac Newton were Bible-believing Christians.
Absolutely.
So what? I mean, there's nothing about that means that Christianity is true. Just because some famous scientist was a Christian, that's, not really anything remarkable given, the popularity of Christianity, especially back in the days when those people were actually alive.
Absolutely. But they just chalk that up to being a bit more primitive and to that being more the social norms. Go ahead, dude.
You think about Carl Sagan, who is an atheist, but he told you billions and billions of the primordial soup and the cosmos.
Alrighty then. Yeah, the Dumbo voice, whatever. I don't want to say that they're trying to mock any particular group of people, but just as a general rule of thumb, you should be a little bit aware of how certain intellectual disabilities can affect somebody's speech pattern, and not necessarily make a call out to that when you're trying to illustrate the stupidity of an idea. And we're all guilty of it, and I'm not saying that we're bad people just for that reason, but we should be a little bit more conscientious of that.
The cosmos always was, always will be.
And the leaves and the crude trees and the, and the stuff. And he would talk like that. And everybody would be like, he had these series on PBS way back when, the Cosmos and stuff, and everybody would think, oh, he's one of the wizards of smart. But he really, people would say, well, then how did this come before that? And he'd be like, the soup, the primordial soup, I don't know.
Well, and what ultimately they're left with, they talk about us, who are Bible believing. Have you ever heard the term God of the gaps, right? So they say,
Yes, I would like to know how he's going to address that.
we see this evidence, and I'll air quote evidence because some of it's not really evidence, but they have these gaps, right? So you talk about macroevolution and species evolution, right? So evolving from one species into another species, not microevolution, which is obvious and evident. That's just adaptation. But when you talk about macroevolution or species evolution, they can't find any transitionary forms, and so they
Everything is a transitional form. Okay?
say, oh, well, God of the gaps, right? You're just saying God because we have these gaps in our knowledge. And they just postulate that over time, we'll get smarter, we'll discover more, and we'll figure it out.
The fossils don't prove.
The problem is, it's going the other way. The more that they discover, right? First there was DNA, and then there was junk DNA, and now they're finding that the junk DNA actually wasn't junk DNA. It was actually, it actually performs a function. The more they discover, the more it is trending towards design. The more it is trending towards this being a mind behind.
Let me just address the junk DNA thing real quickly. Sometimes non-coding DNA gets called junk DNA. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's useless. It just means that that particular portion of the genetic sequence doesn't code for any protein. There are reasons why there is non-coding DNA. I think, if anything, it does point to evolution, but the non-coding DNA is thought to be partially for the as a defense against viruses, because viruses need to insert their DNA into or RNA into your cells and into your genome in order for themselves to reproduce. And so if you have a whole portion of your DNA where you're not going to be using it and the virus happens to insert its DNA in that spot, the virus doesn't have a chance of reproducing itself because that DNA is never going to be expressed. It will get replicated, so in a way the virus is able to reproduce, and that's how you end up with endogenous retroviruses, but the virus isn't going to really become contagious, so to speak. And so that's one line of thought about, the purpose of non-coding DNA. To call it junk DNA just shows a real lack of cocksucker. This fucking to call it junk DNA shows biological illiteracy or at least incompetency. And I say that as a non-geneticist, and the reason why it's important to say that I'm not a geneticist is that if I am not a geneticist, but I have a grasp of some basic genetic concepts, why can't anyone else?
Behind everything. So, what I actually find, and it's the same thing with abortion, right? The more we, before they used to say it was a clump of cells, nobody makes that argument anymore. Nobody. The reason is because science has advanced to the point where we know that that's not true, right? We know that DNA is formed the minute of conception, the blood type, the DNA, how tall that person is going to be. All of that stuff is sorted in the code, in that new unique human.
All right, we're not going to get into abortion here. It's not relevant. And I also won't go on like a veganism tangent here. Although I do have to ask. One sec. I mean, like I personally, if somebody's a pro-lifer but they're not vegan, I don't really take them seriously. But I do have to ask if the concern is about taking a life of something that's unique and sentient and has some kind of potential. Why are these people in general willing to eat meat from factory farmed and slaughtered animals? I just gotta know.
All of that is sorted out in the code, and so the more we discover as science marches on, the more that it actually is backing up what theists believe around design, right? Around a God that actually created it all. So, wanted to start there. Yeah, go ahead.
The book Stephen Meyer wrote,
Yeah.
Darwin's Doubt.
Darwin's Doubt.
It talks about the fact that there are no hybrid or hybrid form, no transition.
Okay. I will address that. There are hybrids. As a matter of fact, I will make a whole video on hybridization to explain, what a hybrid is and how they can form, why they can't form, things like that. I'll do that for you people. Again, I've already said everything's a transitional form. Everything that exists is a transition. And with that spirit in mind, we will just kind of watch the last couple minutes of this, close out, and be on our merry way.
Transitional forms in the fossiliferous strata. Not all.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. We'll talk about the Cambrian explosion and
The Cambrian explosion.
a bunch of that stuff. Any questions about the universe stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys all still believe that God created the universe?
Absolutely.
Just check it out. Make sure I didn't turn any of you off to it. Go ahead, Bob.
I don't know if you're gonna get into this, but Louis Giglio has a really
Yes.
excellent video out. I think
does.
it's called How Great Is Our Guide?
Yes, I saw it.
And he goes all the way out. There's a galaxy out there called the Whirlpool Galaxy
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
that's supposed to be the star-generating galaxy, and in the center of that galaxy is a laminin star. And the laminin star is a glue star-like.
Woo! I just got a notification that my ammonium molybdate came in the mail. I've needed ammonium molybdate for fern stuff.
And we have a laminin molecule in our bodies that's the same thing. It's the glue that holds the rest of the cells together. And he brings that stuff out, and it's awesome.
Yeah,
awesome
your wife
video.
actually turned me on to that special, and then I went home and watched it. So yeah.
Is that where they make the washing machines? Whirlpool Cosmos?
And you don't have
Because
to
I
link
could use,
to the privileged planet either, do you, on this?
I don't on this yet.
Because that's another, it's not like, it's not as in-depth as the fine-tuning thing,
Yes.
but it's just like, oh, all these things are coincidences.
Yes.
It just had to happen this way for us to have
What's that,
life.
is that you, Ross?
It might be. I don't remember who the author was. It's called The Privileged Planet.
Yeah, I've seen it. But yeah, I just when I think about this stuff, it always like one of the things I always tell my wife when I get to heaven, the first thing I want to do is like explore the universe. I'm such a sci-fi nerd, like that's what I want to do too.
We'll have eternity to do it.
Yeah,
but it
so-
may not be there since the heavens are gonna.
That's
Yeah.
who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows what'll
It's,
be there? But I just think it is so cool, and so when I think about it, I just think how can any of us believe this happened? That sprang, out of nothing. So
Really.
ex nihilo. All right, who wants to close us in prayer?
Gutierrez.
Ivan, you want to close us in prayer?
Sure.
Okay. I think that's the gist of it.